everybody.
The countdown.
The countdown has ended and we have begun. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that gets me up in arms, and it's called Don't Put Your Brand in a Box.
She gets ferocious about it.
I do, whether it's literally or figuratively. And we're going to talk about both of those things. There are really two situations that can occur to make this happen. When someone else puts your brand in a box, or when you put your own brand in a box. So find out what we mean by this today and why it's happening at an alarming rate. And most importantly, how you can just bust open that box.
Yeah.
Right? And
stand out.
Yep. And what we call the sea of sameness. You don't want to be in that sea, guys. All right.
It's tumultuous.
I'm Tanya Eberhardt, founder of BrandFace. So we help business stars differentiate themselves, and we do that through personal branding.
Hey guys, I'm Michael Carr. I'm the COO of BrandFace. I was actually a client before I became a partner in the company, and we're the only comprehensive personal brand building system across the globe. All right. Let's talk about the epidemic of people getting put in a box. Like, it blows my mind. Like, other people will put you in a box in a heartbeat. All right. So I'm going to talk to you about the literal side of what's going on. Okay. Like the black and white of what is happening in just about every industry, especially in these tech days. Right. It's taken us 25 years to even start to be profitable as tech days. But everybody wants to go that route, right? Bigger brokerages, they stick you in a box, right? They give you a couple of initials for your card, and then they say, here's your card, here's your template, here's your website.
Which is also a template.
You got the Wall Street, hacking in on our being competition to us. So you got the big Z and the R. I'm not even going to name them. Y'all know who they are. That want to turn you into a personal guide. Have a thumbnail down at the bottom. It's not branded. You can't really tell even if it's what it is, and if it's an agent, what it is. And let's click on this thing. It's holding you into a box, and because of that, there's little room for you. There's little room for your information. There's practically no room for your story inside of that. There's nearly zero opportunity for creativity in that. And there's absolutely no point of differentiation. And that is the crux to how to build your business from the street out. Now, 99% of the time, you can get around this in those bigger corporate entities. And don't get me wrong, guys, I'm not against corporate entities like that. They have their place in society. I'm just saying that they tend to squash rather than to allow you to bloom. Okay. And 99% of the time, though, you can circumvent that if you spend your own money on it and order your own cards, build your own website, and start your own social media pages. Many of you do these things, and unfortunately, you're following the example of the very people that put you in the box to begin with. So even though you've stepped out of their box, you're still in your own box. And as long as you remain, you just need to know that as long as you continue to follow that pattern, then you're in the same sea of sameness that Tanya talked about before, and you don't want to be in that. Okay, so there's your literal box that we see happening. And what we want to try to do is get you to think outside of that box.
Exactly. So now let's talk about the figurative side of your brand being in a box. So that happens because really we're creatures of habit, right? So we're told to kind of get in the box, and we just get in and we close the flap, and that's the box, and we just do what we're told. And in the corporate world, that works great. But in this world, in the world where you are the face of your business, because remember, people don't do business with a logo right here on the back of the book. They do business with a person.
Mm-hmm.
So a person. So what you want to do is make sure that you have your story out there, right? Because what happens when you don't have that brand really dialed in is that you feel like you have to adapt to their box. It's like, okay, well, they're telling me I have a box here, place a literal box to put my photo, a literal box that I can put a shortened bio in on a website. And that may be all there is. And that leads to the figurative putting your brand in a box, because then you feel like you've got no place to go. I have these boxes and I'm being told what to put in them, and I just do that. You don't really think about being outside that box. It's easier just to use the box, meaning the templated business cards, templated websites, even templated social media cover photos, right down to the scripts that you use in emails and phone calls. Because remember, messaging, how you speak, how you articulate, how you communicate what you stand for and what sets you apart is done through brand messaging and those scripts for the phone calls and the emails, and how, those are really important and a big part of the brand. So just to recap, you've got the literal sense where you're told, here's your box for your little photo, here's your box for your bio, here's your business card. Just put the things that belong in the boxes they go in, and that's good. And then you have the figurative box where you're just accepting this because why? Because you don't have your own brand built yet. And so you don't really have a choice but to say, put your photo there, put this shortened bio here about where you worked, how long you worked there, why you're the greatest real estate agent or whatever in the world. And they're, let's face it, most of those bios are pretty boring, right? But that's what we hear from you guys, not necessarily coming from us. So how do you avoid those two boxes? Well, first,
you got to start with your point of differentiation.
That's
exactly where it starts every time. You have to think
Exactly.
about your point of differentiation.
The second thing is that all comes in, in the confines of what of our 3D process: define, develop, and display. And discovering that point of differentiation happens in the define phase. But just to kind of recap what these are: defining your ideal customers and that point of differentiation. What is it that sets you apart from everyone else so you don't have to be part of that sea of sameness anymore? Developing every piece and part that goes with that, from unique photos, background images, a story in your brand messaging, your own logo, your brand colors, all of those things that uniquely make you you and tell your story, and then displaying that correctly and consistently everywhere.
Consistence big.
Every single place.
Yeah, and you can avoid it by every time you start to market. Like if you're sitting around thinking, hey, I need to do some more marketing, I need to ramp up this fourth quarter, get ready for a big start in 2022, what I'm going to market, you ask yourself whether you're inside that marketing box or outside that marketing box. That's very important. Be creative. Think about doing things different than other people, than other your competitors. So many times what we want to do in business is say, hey, what's working for you, right? And we should do that because we should know. But following along in those footsteps are not the way to make yourself stand out. Right. I remember in the town that we're in, I had an agent. He's passed now. He was a very good, very dear agent and friend of this family. He had some competition move in, and next thing you know, they got a billboard not far from our office in the downtown area. And he's like, "Oh, we got to go get more billboards around here. They're creeping in on us." And I'm like, "No, dude. That we're plowing new ground. We already sowed this ground. They're just coming in here reiterating what we've already done." Okay. So the point being is, don't chase any competitor and all that. Don't chase the norm. Look to be different. That's what you want to try to do.
Mm-hmm. And the only thing worse than somebody else putting your brand in a box is when you do it to yourself.
For sure.
And when you're forced to do it to yourself because you don't have a brand defined, developed, and ready. So,
so many times, you're right. I got to say this too. So many times we hear from you guys and they're like, I really just don't know what sets me apart. I just don't know how I can be different than other agents. We can show you how to be different than other agents. I assure you.
Yeah, we get that a lot of times. And I want to say this too, because I've been getting, more and more of the, what we call complicated calls, right? People that call up our team, get on a call with us to learn more about, how they can develop their brand and how we can help them do that. And one of the things that they always say is, well, I'm complicated. I'm very complicated. And I do understand that. And there are some very complicated cases. We have people who they're investors. They do a little bit of commercial. Most of what they do is residential, but they focus on this area, but they also focus on these two other areas. They're known for other things. They're also have their own podcast. They have all sorts of things. And those things to us are like taking a breath. I have to say. They're so easy to us because that's what, frankly, I think that's what we were born to do.
No, it is. Well, I mean, that's the way I started with Tanya. I had a very complicated situation. And she's like, nope, I got this. I can show you exactly what to do with it. And she has for 8 years now.
Well, let me tell you just a snippet of that real quick, because that is really very important to understand. When I first started working with Michael, he had opened a brokerage not long before we had started working together. It was just basically, he says 1.5 agents at the time, which one was very part-time, so 1.5 agents. And at the time, you know, he knew the look that he wanted for a brand. He knew some of the things that he wanted to get across, what he wanted to stand for. Was that, you know, the standard, you know, setting a standard and really having the highest quality of customer service, and some of those things that if we say them, they sound very boring, but we've got to find a different way of getting that across. And he wanted people to know, even though he was newer to this town that he's in now, that he had the goods. You know, people should hire him, and they didn't have to worry about whether he was newer to this specific area or not. So the one thing he did have going for him back then, for sure, was he mentioned to me one day, well, I've definitely sold more residential properties than anybody else in the United States. And I said, really? Tell me how, right? And that's when he started telling me more of his story about being an auctioneer, being licensed in 33 states as both an auctioneer and a real estate broker, and having all that experience and having to be actively involved in all of those transactions. So you learn so much, what not to do, what to do, all of the, you learn like any kind of crazy thing that can happen, you learn through that, right? You learn the pitfalls, you learn the loopholes, you learn so much. That equates to one thing, guys: experience. So there were a couple of things we did immediately. We changed his personal tagline to America's top selling real estate auctioneer. And that allowed people who were doing business with him on a one-to-one level, or with him as the face of his brokerage, to let people know he's sold more properties than anybody in the United States. And then we extended that later on from a business aspect, from business side of things, to 78,000 homes sold on his billboards all throughout this, you know, North Georgia area. So those things scream experience. And that's really what we campaigned on, if you will. It's kind of like this political campaign. So thanks for letting me go on and on about that.
Thanks. Hey, it was about my favorite subject.
You.
Yeah.
He's probably not kidding. Just kidding. Okay. So I did, you know, a lot of times people say, well, give us examples. Tell us what you mean, right? But here's what I want to stick with every one of you. His example is not your example. And that's perfectly okay. You don't have to have sold more properties than anybody else. You don't have to have had more, you know,
No, we've branded 18-year-old starters.
Absolutely.
Who have gone on to kill it.
Who have tripled their business since coming into the Brand Face program.
Yep.
And it's amazing to see all of that. But you need to know that, and this is why it becomes such a thing of pride for you to be able to put your brand out there, to not fall into that box, because you don't have a box. You are the box, right?
Right.
And that's what exactly. And you'll have that. But keep in mind, your brand shouldn't look like anybody else's. It shouldn't be held up to anybody else's, compared to anybody else's, or anything about anybody else's brand. And that's one of the reasons that we hesitate to show people different brands that we've created, because they look at it and say, oh, well, that's not me. And it's like, of course it's not you.
We already knew that.
Of course it's not you. You are you. Your story hasn't been developed yet. So we'll leave you with that. Don't let anybody put your brand in a box, most especially you. Okay?
That's right. Hey, folks, if you've got any other questions about branding, you can always go to discussyourbrand.com. That is discussyourbrand.com. And you can schedule a free 30-minute session with our staff. We'll talk to you about branding. We'll talk to you about how you can start building your brand. We'll talk to you about, if you have one already, how you can improve upon the one that you have. We just love to talk about branding, guys. It's what we do. We eat it, live it, sleep it, breathe it every day.
All right. That's it, guys. And thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it so much. And we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Sign us
And
off.
hey, listen, guys, it's all about prosperity. And when we say prosperity, we're not just talking about money. It's important, but it's not everything. We're talking about the 360 of an abundant life that we wish for every one of you, I promise. And we know here at Brandface, though, that prosperity favors the bold. So we say, be bold, folks, especially with your brand and especially in 2021. And thank you, Miss Tanya, for everything.
Thank you. All right, guys. See you next time.
Bye, guys.